Jamaica, make we do the right thing. Make we live good today for a better tomorrow. Talk it out. Don't fight it out. The time by the Ministry of National Security is
6:30.
The government of Jamaica recently announced that unexplained wealth orders are no longer an anti-money laundering priority. This has caused much pushback from civil society. Some of the WHO are saying that it's a retrograde step in our move towards transparency and effective financial law enforcement. Of course, we discuss on Lead Story. Welcome back. This is Lead Story. I'm Nika Lewis. We're talking about unexplained wealth orders. The Minister of National Security, Dr. Horace Chang, has said that the proposal to include undisclosed wealth order in amended legislation has been paused. And this is due to issues considering the rights of the subjects of investigations. But a group of stakeholders, including the PSOJ, the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce, JMEA, Jamaicans for Justice, National Integrity Action, and other groups have said that you don't need to throw out the baby with the bathwater. And of course, they say that we can craft the legislation to consider or to be more considerate of individual rights and also the national security and accountability interests. So this evening, we're joined by Lieutenant Commander George Overton, co-chair of the Crime Monitoring and Oversight Committee, CMOC, and Carol Narcisse, Transparency Advocate. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening. Good evening to you and your listeners.
Thank you both for joining us. Well, let me start with this matter and then we'll see who best I should throw it to. So I want to know initially what prompted the letter to asking the government to place back unexplained wealth orders as the priority for the anti-money laundering matters. I'm going to put this one to you, Mr. Overton.
Okay, it really is not as anti-money laundering matters. The crime consensus, the stakeholders who came together pre-2020, in their deliberations came up with some 34 items that formed the Memorandum of Understanding for the 2020 signing of August 2020 signing of the Consensus on Crime document. And in there was the introduction of an unexplained wealth order. This was agreed to and signed on by the government, the opposition, and some 23 stakeholder groups from civil society. And since 2020, CMOC has been monitoring the progress of the items on this memorandum. It got to a point where going along fine, and we got to where the introduction of the unexplained wealth orders, which I will refer to as UWOs, yes, came to be due for progress and delivery. And we kept getting reports that pushed it further back. And eventually the government has moved away from the table on the crime consensus, and we have got no further indications from them on the progress. However, I believe that the 2023 throne speech of the Governor General did indicate the government's intent to introduce the unexplained wealth orders and taking steps to do so. And this has remained an indication from government throughout. And we're quite surprised that we're learning today that it is not, well, again, we're hearing that it's not as great a priority, but still a priority. that the drafting of the unexplained wealth order legislation should occur.
Well, let me bring in Miss Narcisse because I'm heading to a quick break. But Miss Narcisse, hearing what Mr. Overton has just explained in a very practical way, tell us generally how these UWOs work and why this is a big issue at this time.
Yeah, well, I'm no lawyer, let me say that first and foremost. So my layperson's understanding of how such legislation can work is that where security forces have perhaps multiple reasons to have an individual or an entity under suspicion of perhaps money laundering or other a mismatch between conspicuous consumption and no indication of the source of the wealth and the funds, and they have reasonable grounds on which to suspect that there may be illegal sources involved, that the unexplained wealth orders are one tool in a toolbox of things that are available to the security forces to aid their investigation. Now, right. we're in a country where there is scamming. There's a tremendous amount of scamming. We had the Minister of National Security some months ago in Parliament mentioning that the money laundering issue, that the development sector, the construction development sector, may be one of the places in which funds are funneled. And he mentioned that in past. So we have had reason yes. to see this mismatch between use of money, consumption, indications of wealth, and suspected ill-gotten sources.
All right,
so
Ms. Narcisse,
for the government to, at this point, be peddling on a tool that would aid us is puzzling.
Right. Please hold any further thoughts. We're up on a quick break and we'll be right back talking about UWOs.
If the world were ending tomorrow, what would you blow all your savings on today?
Vegas.
Hell yeah. Vegas.
Have a gig for you and the crew. Mobile, next week, sir. Where you say?
Just have to grab it down the lane.
No, I hear nothing about that, brother, there, no.
And tell me some have a big show line up for it.
Look up on the stage, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's the innocent. But we are idiots to allow Grabs to be treating us like idiots. Under no circumstances could that be my pay.
We's a group. We have to stick together.
A group of idiots. We don't even have fear to go home.
My girl, you see the youth that want to sit down here, sir?
Find Central Pitside, brought to you by Edgechem, AIM Financial Corporation, Texaco, and Connex.
Welcome back. It's Lead Story, and we are talking about unexplained wealth orders. We have arranged a quick package for you to give you greater understanding of what we're talking about. Have a look.
The government of Jamaica has recently decided to remove unexplained wealth orders, UWOs, from its list of anti-money laundering priorities. This marks a significant shift from earlier plans to introduce UWOs as part of the government's strategy to combat organized crime and corruption. Unexplained wealth orders are court orders that compel individuals to disclose and prove their source of wealth. These orders are typically used when a person's assets appear disproportionate to their declared income, allowing authorities to investigate potential illicit activity. Initially, UWOs were viewed as a powerful tool to disrupt criminal networks, promote transparency, and fight money laundering. So much so, the proposal to implement UWOs had gained enough support to be included in the National Consensus on Crime. This consensus outlined the need to prioritize amendments to the Proceeds of Crime Act to strengthen the role of UWOs and reverse the burden of proof, which will mean it will now be on the person being investigated to prove their source of wealth is legitimate. The amendment's goal was to enable the seizure of assets from those who obtain wealth through criminal means, including individuals guilty of money laundering and other serious crimes. It also included measures to prevent lawyers from accepting payments with the proceeds of crime. However, the Minister of National Security stated that concerns about potential breaches of constitutional rights have delayed the implementation of the UWO amendments. Some stakeholders who initially supported the proposal are now voicing their disapproval of the government's decision to draw brakes. In a joint letter, they argue that the legal concerns could be addressed by limiting the use of UWOs to investigative purposes and as a means of gathering evidence for further inquiry. They also suggested that declarations be kept private to safeguard individual rights. The stakeholders further emphasized that the proposal covers a wide range of financial crimes extending beyond the public sector to address issues such as money laundering, scamming, and bribery. We discussed these matters on Lead Story.
There you have it. Thank you so much, Jonathan Atkins, for providing us with that context. And we have on Zoom two stakeholders who are themselves very concerned. We have Lieutenant Commander George Overton. He's the co-chair of the Crime Monitoring and Oversight Committee, CMOC, and Carol Narcisse, a transparency advocate. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So go ahead, Ms. Narcisse.
Yeah, if I may, I wanted to just add to what I said earlier to say that the concern about constitutional breach in how we craft the legislation and so on, that's not a new concern. Mm-hmm. All legislation that you're crafting ought to be put to the constitutional test. And we have a long and well-developed history of legal drafting in Jamaica. And we have legal scholars of great renown. So it's not beyond our capacity to, in the 3 or 4 years that this has been a part of the crime consensus agreement, that this matter would have been addressed. It's not beyond us to do the kind of proper legal work in the drafting. It's not beyond us to look at the various models that exist in the world and to craft constitutionally sound and consistent legislation. We've been doing this. So to advance that as a reason for the pause is not terribly convincing.
Well, this one is for you, Mr. Overton. As the co-chair of CMOC, are there implications, especially regarding the government's move at this time? You say it's no longer a main priority of sorts, but it's still on the priority list. But could this not undermine the gains in accountability structures and financial investigation that the government of the day would have made thus far?
Certainly it would. Certainly it would. For us, it's a matter of strengthening what we already have. The concerns about the constitutionality, yes, we have to find the balance there. But we have had legislation on our books since 2001 that reverses the burden of proof and puts it on the accused person. That's been there all along in the illicit enrichment legislations. And all of a sudden now for us to worry about it. Yes, I agree. As Carol said, every legislative work that is done must ensure that we abide and recognize the rights of the individuals by way of the Constitution. But we've been doing this since 2001. How come all of a sudden it stops everything? And for the last 4 years, where this has been on the table as a priority, that all of a sudden it's no longer an urgent priority. Yet at this point in time, the drafting instructions for this legislation 4 years later is still not there. The prioritizing of legislative work is not on the cabinet legislative agenda website. And therefore, what are we to believe?
Well, we're going to find that out after this break. We'll be right back.
The time by Grace. Taste that moves you is
6:45.
Mommy, it's the third time nearly deaf with them old pat and pan there, no? Get up and go by the lot of me, you see?
Yo, what's cracking the lacking and packing and macking?
Can you read to me the nameplate?
Judge Ebony K. Williams.
So the only thing that matters in this particular courtroom is how I see it. I'm going to find in favor of the plaintiff to the tune of $3,200.
no more fear of missing out. CVM TV News is on YouTube. Get up-to-date news, sports, and business content at CVM TV News anytime, anywhere. Subscribe now to CVM TV News to see it happen.
Hi everyone, my name is Kurt Dunn.
Greetings from Kali's Kelly Yoga.
Hey, it's Travell Morrison, and I am your National Physical Activity Specialist. And it's time to make a move.
Jamaica, let's get moving again. Season 2 of the Ministry of Health and Wellness Jamaica Move series is here. Join us Wednesdays at 5 a.m. and Saturdays at 8 a.m. right here on CVM TV. Let's get moving.
Make a move now.
Welcome back to Lead Story. We're talking about unexplained wealth orders. Sounds interesting, doesn't it? We have two unique guests this afternoon. Well, this evening, we have Lieutenant Commander George Overton, co-chair of the Crime Monitoring and Oversight Committee, and Carol Narcisse, a transparency advocate. We're talking about the UWOs. And before we went to the break, there were a few things that we were trying to find out. For example, this one is for you, Ms. Narcisse. Is there a concern that the move by the government is coming at a time where the Prime Minister himself is the subject of financial investigations?
Well, far be it from me to be speculative, but it is very, very bad timing. Whether it's coincidental or whatever, it cannot be a worse time to be backpedaling from an item in the crime fighting tool, financial crimes fighting tool, toolbox that you agreed to as part of the consensus on crime, right? We've all been talking about the need to have a consensus on crime in Jamaica, that it can't be a political football, etc., etc. We went through a process that resulted in a consensus. Private sector, civil society, government, opposition, etc. And the unexplained wealth order was just one of several things agreed to. So to not even to go back to that forum to say, you know what, we have been taking a look. We don't think we're actually going to be able to do this in under the next X period of time based on the research we're doing, etc.
Yes.
To not go back to that stakeholder forum and give an account before you are announcing that it's no longer a priority is very curious governance.
Okay, you put it politely. So let me ask Mr. Overton. Mr. Overton, how do you put it?
I put it in a similar light that we were at the table, with the government not at the table with us now. We were still in communication with the government, and we could have been told that, look, we're having some concerns. Here are the concerns. We don't want to keep it as an urgent priority anymore. Because we would have said, well, can we meet and discuss this? We share the thoughts. Because we too have thoughts as to how it may be implemented. And we knock heads together and see how we find the resolution to the situation.
Yes.
We can't just throw it out and say, no, that's not going to happen.
And certainly not at a time when the international community might be a little more skeptical of us and our regulations, because we would have seen the damage done to our reputation by lottery scamming, other forms of financial crimes. So what do you think this is going to do now in the minds of the international onlookers?
We celebrated Jamaica being taken off the grey list in June, because of the efforts that were made by the country and the financial sector to take steps towards stamping out money laundering and various things. This is an indication that, okay, we figured we've got over the hump, we can go back to business as usual. It's sending the wrong message to our international partners.
And what is the message, pray tell?
Well, if we are saying that we are not going to keep this accountability and accounting for unexplained wealth as a priority in the country, then money laundering, as long as you are good at it and hide properly, you can get away with it.
Have good lawyers, perhaps.
Exactly. Well, exactly.
Miss Narcisse, like she wants to come in. Yes, Miss Narcisse.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's either we're all seized with the seriousness of the crime situation in Jamaica, and we're consistent about our stand, and we are working together to ensure that human rights protection and at the legislative framework are in place, and we can do the two things. This is not, we can do it, right? We can be consistent with our constitution, and we can make good law that help to strengthen the legislative environment. One of the things about the unexplained wealth orders and such legislation is the deterrent effect that it can have, right? If I know I have money I need to launder, and I know I'm a scam and I have only but money, I need to figure out a way to try and make it look legitimate and so on and so forth. If I know that there is a tool in the security toolbox that can have me under surveillance, have me under suspicion, and come and knock on the door and say, hello, explain how you are 16 years old and driving a BMW and own 3 mansions and are building an apartment complex.
So they're chopping.
So
that's the idea.
So if you know that there is a piece of legislation that makes it more likely that you can come under scrutiny and question and so on and so forth, there is potentially a deterrent effect, right? So we're either serious because, look, we know that money laundering is a fact in Jamaica. We know that behind it comes violent crime. We know that the proceeds of the pursuits that are illegal, that those proceeds are hard fought for, that people lose their life over it.
Yes.
And so if we can create a legislative framework that strengthens deterrence for these things, that improves our capacity to hold people to account, I cannot imagine why a government would not consider that to be priority.
Well, I will put this one to you and then to the gentleman. So generally, how effective would you say that Jamaica would have been in implementing the recommendations on the National Consensus on Crime? And then the final aspect of this, I would want Mr. Overton to come in.
I'm sorry, that was a question to me?
The effectiveness of implementation of recommendations coming out of the National Consensus on Crime.
It has been spotty. I mean, the Consensus Oversight Committee, which I'm not a part of, but I've been involved in their consultations and so on. They do reports. They provide us with periodic reports, and those reports have been disappointing in many respects. Right, a lot of the legislative part of it has been lagging, and you really have to wonder what is that? What explains that?
Yes.
The government has been dismissive of the consensus. It said quite out loud, the Minister of National Security, I think it was, who they basically said, look, this is, no, we don't really put much store behind this. So they've been dismissive of the consensus. That's a very puzzling thing. When the rhetoric is about consensus and agreement in the society. It's not easy to have the human rights groups, the private sector, the church umbrella groups, opposition and government around a table coming to consensus.
Well,
so it's a strategy that it's very unfortunate that it has not had the due regard from the soundings that have come from the government, and this current development just adds to the questions about the seriousness.
Well, very quickly, Lieutenant Commander, if you could just share your understanding of the effectiveness of those recommendations and them coming into play from these CMOC discussions and the consensus meetings, where are we as a nation? Where are we headed?
Okay. The initial consensus agreement had good traction and there was good progress in the initial stages. I believe one of the success stories was the monitoring and reporting on the transformation and modernization of the Jamaica Constabulary Force. And that was a force committed to meeting the items in the agreement and